There we go.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the August edition of Philly MacAdmins meetings. A little bit covered tonight. On tonight's agenda, we have what's new, and we also have a special guest speaker, Jeff Porten, tonight. So, this will be a special broadcast, but we're going to go right into what's new. We have a couple of things to cover, especially something really important for everybody. So, yeah. We'll be talking tonight about the macOS Mojave beta, particularly on some of the a particular new feature that's coming out that, since it's officially been discussed in some public forums, is technically not covered by the NDA. But it's very important for all of us to at least be aware of it if we're not already aware of it. So we'll be, again, talking about Office updates, and we have some news about this as well. Doing our security roundup, and items of interest and conferences. So right to the nitty-gritty, the macOS Mojave beta. So beta 8 was released recently, and it included the user privacy whitelist exceptions that were talked about way back in WWDC in June. They finally made it into a beta 8, and it's a very, very tight window we have now for testing and for implementation. And it's my understanding that all the MDM vendors got word of this exactly the same time as we did, so it's going to be very tight to see support for this coming when Mojave probably drops. And I think if we go by historical precedents, the new operating system will probably release at the end of October, end of September, beginning of October. So that doesn't really give us a lot of time. So maybe like 6 weeks or less now before this thing comes out. And this is going to severely impact a lot of people's workflows. If you don't know what the user privacy stuff is that is coming in macOS Mojave, Apple has basically sipped parts of the user home folder for things like contacts, calendars. So anything that traverses over the user folder will get a prompt asking permission to actually say if this is okay, that they can go through that. So, but because the user is prompted and the user has the option of saying no, and that will affect certain applications. So pretty much anything, your Jeff customer, that's a recon that could probably trigger it, or some other script that you're running in the policy. For Monkey, that again is the same kind of thing as anything that runs either a script that traverses over that user folder at all, even like a simple du-h.
Even if you go to a standard EEP, that won't override it?
No, well, the override mechanism was just introduced in this beta mechanism, in this beta. Just introduced. That's the whole point. So people have only started testing this week.
Oh, this sucks.
So
no way we're going there.
And Apple's true to form. There's been a dearth of documentation about the specific feature. But the good news is that the TCC channel, which was named for basically where all this information is being stored, is in the TCC database. The TCC channel in MacAdmins Slack has the lowdown. There is example mobile configs. There is a Google Doc listing what applications and or processes have been triggering that, because they've been finding things from everything from like Photoshop to AppleScript. The things that inadvertently trip this seem to be growing by the day, and a lot of that discussion is happening in the TCC channel in the MacAdmins Slack. Mike Boylan, who works for Apple, is in that channel monitoring the discussion and sort of trying to help guide us along, especially since there's been no documentation yet posted anywhere about this, except for the ones that we put it out. There's about like 8 or 9 pinned items in the channel, and if you want to go through all of those to see that, there's a couple of gists on how to reset the TCC database so you can for testing. There's a couple of commands in there, and So that's if you're not testing in the Mojave data, and you're doing any sort of scripting to configure Macs whatsoever, you really need to test your workflow against this sooner rather than later. And it's the way things are going. It's part of Apple's whole security posture. They're trying to lock things down as much as possible, but giving the user the ultimate arbiter of what can and can't run.
They realize there's enterprise companies where
yes, but Apple's entire philosophy doesn't make any distinction between what admins want and what malware wants, and that's the key. Because the things that we do are virtually indistinguishable from what malware wants to do. So, but Apple's at least trying to give us a mechanism so we can whitelist stuff. And we could probably debate on for years on whether or not it's the right mechanism, but this is what they're giving us. This is what we have to work with. So you want to start testing your workflows against this today or yesterday, actually. But we can have more discussion about this when we get to the open discussion. But I wanted to make an important point about that right here, because it's pretty big news and everybody's affected. So moving on to something a little more pleasant, Office 2016. So 1616 was recently released, and this is officially the final Office 2016 release. So as of next month, it will the 16.17 release is officially Office 2019. But in this release, obviously, it fixes to Outlook, Word, PowerPoint, etc., etc. It's now in maintenance mode. So going forward, there'll still be updates to Office 2016, but the version I don't think will iterate. It's not the major version, it's the minor version. Both those don't iterate, and I forget what the other one is supposed to be. But they may tag on the extra version after that to distinguish that. But I don't think it'll go. There'll still always be 1616. The last number will probably continue to iterate as they do security and bug fixes. But it's pretty much in maintenance mode at this point. Also, the auto update 4.2 was also released recently, so there's details on that, and Skype for Business at 16.20. Moving on to Office 2019. So it drops in September. I'm hearing September 24th is when the volume license for Office 2019 will be officially available. The features and licensing matrix is that there's a link in the slides for that. Office 2016 had the minimal amount of features. Office 2019 will have more features, but only Office 365 subscriptions will have everything. It will always get the new stuff. And I talked about that. The other big thing is that Microsoft is moving or incrementing the minimum OS requirement for Office 365 in 2019. Next month, starting, the minimum required version will be 10.12 Sierra. So there was some discussion earlier this week about Microsoft potentially bumping that up again to High Sierra in January. But last I heard, they're still in discussion about it. They're reconsidering that based on an immense amount of user feedback. Paul Bowden apparently delivered each of the executives 9 pages of user comments about why this was not a good idea. I don't think it's a dead idea. I think they're just reconsidering when they want to do that. So hopefully there'll be more news to come. If you want to keep track of all that stuff, be sure to be in the Microsoft Office channel, the MacAdmins Slack, because that's where all that information comes in. Paul Bowden and Eric Schweibert are from Microsoft, are in that channel often, and are very helpful and very instrumental in making sure Microsoft understands what MacAdmins want and need, and how the best to serve us. Moving on to security. So Patrick Wardle at the Black Hat DEF CON had a talk about, specifically about how, as he described, the really lame bug that allows you to do synthetic mouse clicks and basically bypass sort of all that user approval dialogues that you get. The details obviously are in the link, but yeah, this is a it's not a trivial thing because you still need to get access to the Mac itself. But if you put in the right code, you can bypass a lot of that user approval for things like kernel extensions. And as we know, if you get a kernel extension installed, yeah, you're pretty much there. You own it. You own everything. So details are in the link there. So Patrick didn't follow normal disclosure procedures, and there's a reason why he did that, discussed in the article. But so there isn't an open CVE for this that I'm aware of, and I know, and Apple hasn't commented on it yet. So we'll see. I haven't. He said he tested on High Sierra. I don't know if he tested on Mojave, so we don't know if it's been patched in Mojave. Or at least I haven't heard of where it's patched in Mojave.
I thought they announced 2 weeks ago that Mojave is going to set this up so that none of these scripting or remote control schemes worked anymore. Right. And there was no mention of whether there'd be a whitelist for what you want. So.
Right. That's still up to the audience. I mean, the whole user privacy thing that's there. I don't know how this exploit relates to what's coming in Mojave quite yet. If anybody knows, obviously, let me. The other thing, big news, was the news about that Australian teen who had hacked Apple, copied 90 gigs of data in his hack folder, which was the best part about that disclosure. And the other best part was, of course, how he hoped to work for Apple one day. The big takeaway, though, is that pretty much I think he was just grabbing assets and not any user information. And Apple confirmed that no user information was exposed. So it was just one of those.
How young man? How old was it?
Yeah, like 16. I think it was like maybe a little younger when he first. Like he was like maybe 14 or something when he first got in. So.
That's no better.
Yeah. Yeah. So and today, this just came out today. This is hat tip from Thomas Reed. New OS malware fall chill. So there's a Trojanized auto update by a the details seem to think that is very targeted. This has been targeted towards banks. So I mean, Jared is not here, so he's the one who will probably be most affected by it. But so data that it has had a launch date, and it's clever enough to say auto update. So as to try and sort of mask or obfuscate their actual true purpose. But it looks like, yeah, they're starting to get a little bit clever. But yeah, this is obviously big news there. Well, so I don't know if you guys are having stuff, but there's a big O365 activation outage last week that it affected everybody. I think, last or so plus hours. I think we started like Thursday morning, I think. So that was well, because we're not completely on 365, but not impact package. And so Group has a new piece of software out called Installer, and Installer installs macOS and additional packages from the recovery hardware. So, and using this particular the sort of image, a T2 Mac from that, yes. Don't have MDM or don't have a need for MDM. This will actually work. So
It really does. Like that's have you seen that work?
have I seen that work?
Yeah.
No, but I trust Greg.
Yeah. I don't know if he has any videos or anything up yet. But,
No.
okay.
No. Knowing how Greg works, I trust him that it works.
I could be running a little behind. So that implies that you can't reinstall from the recovery disk with a T2 Mac to be going?
No, you can.
Okay.
You can, but you can only reinstall the OS from recovery. Yeah, right. This allows you to install other packages. Like if you wanted to install something like Monkey to bootstrap your entire imaging process, which is the most immediate, probably what Greg was trying to solve.
Also a manual process too.
It also is a manual process, although I didn't have a chance to get it into the Tim Perfect had something on Twitter where you could sort of automate that, a way to potentially automate that is what I should say. So but yeah, it came out late, and I didn't get a chance to edit the thing. But so there's a couple of ways. Like imaging is kind of not dead. What? Workflows. But imaging is just such a baked-in traditional term for deployment that imaging covers everything, even if the workflow isn't actually imaging per se. People still say imaging, especially management and older execs for a while.
I say build. Build.
So the videos for PSU MacAdmins are up now. So if you missed it, like I did this year, you can now experience in the comfort of your own home. A new conference for Objective by the Sea, in November in beautiful. Please, if you have any budget, take me with you. So, and lastly, the Japanese Music Conference, October 23rd to 25th. Got to take all that out. So the pricing is still more expensive now than it was last month because early bird pricing is over now. As we mentioned last month, both myself and John will be presenting at this year's JNUC. So we'll have some representation of the JNUC finally. So
I should be there.
If you are coming, come to our presentations and help us represent. And that we're going to hold off on the open discussion because we're going to have our presentation from Jeff. So we'll give him a chance to set up here.
Thank you.
Oh, sir. Was it last month? Was it Fleet Smith came up with a work around the MDM it's live thing? I think maybe 10, but we just streamed. Couldn't say that bug. Somebody wanted to do it. I learned what you can. Basically, I'm in the middle of tab of MDM.
Yeah. Was your son in development camp this year? Coding camp? Or was he in a...
what was in the bio. My name is Jeff Porten. I just wrote a book called Your Productivity. I've been a Mac consultant for about 25 years, which extended into whatever. So web design, database design, enough that I can sell. And disorders. So this entire time, I've been book on the market, trying every application that was out there, and also writing that idea. So trial and error distilled down, so you don't have to go through all that. There we go. 3-second delay on hitting the spacebar. I'm going to start with what I'm calling Q. I want to ask the question. I want to see a show of hands. So, how many people here have equivalent jobs where you're working 9 to 5? How many people who have those jobs only work the 9 to 5 and aren't on call at 10 at night when the server goes down? One. Okay. So everybody else is effectively 24/7 for emergencies and that kind of thing. That's the next question. Okay, so the next. This one is private. Keep in your mind compensated for time, so you may or may not get overtime. Contracted right to work 40 hours a week, and some weeks you're working 60. Does that translate to flip into any other kind of work perk? So that's the next question is, do you have personal goals defined separate from your work? So everybody works for reasons. It could be that you need to, you're ambitious, you want to, you want to advance your career, you want to get promoted to the top. So these are all 4 completely different reasons for why you might do what you do, but most people don't really think, have a vague sense of these 4 things, and so what translate into those goals? If you excel at work, that's the next question. If you excel at your work, if you're the best Mac admin you can be, and you manage your team perfectly, and everything is humming smoothly, well, your boss will be happy, you're happy, but does that translate into the raise you wanted? If you're looking for money, does it translate into the promotion? Does your work as a transport? That's a disconnect that many people have. But they can do everything they can excel at everything that they can control, but they may or may not get the particular rewards that they intend to get from their work, because that's up to your superiors, that's up to the higher ups. This is lesser problem for people who are self-employed, because if more work, if you do it more efficiently, you typically make more money, or you typically have more accepting work over here or turning down work over there. But the more your work is 2,000 hours a year block, the less. So once you define your goals, you want to make sure that the things you're excelling at and the work you're putting into it and the time and the dedication is translating to whatever it is you define in that second bullet. So this leads to when you need a formal system to organize your tasks, organize your projects. It's my experience, and from everything I've read, that nearly everybody starts with whatever system they came up with in high school becomes the comfortable glove they put on. In high school, you learn that you work certain hours, you study a certain amount, you organize which papers need to go and when, and then you get to college, and some of your papers require 2 months lead time before it's due. So you come. Once you get into the work world, you learn whatever procedures happened at your first job, and that ad hoc systems, which work fine for some people. Some people are naturally well organized. Everything that is ad hoc and sort of scattered around works. You don't have a need to go to a little more planned. But these are the reasons why you might want to plan. The first is what we were just talking about. When your day-to-day work does not match of your personal goals, which means, of course, you have to know what your personal goals are and what your long-term goals are, and where you want to be specifically. But you might say to yourself, this is where I see myself vaguely, and the more you specifically you find that, the more you can make sure that you've got that path planned out, or at least you know what the direction of the plan. The next is you've got this instinctive feeling that you're out of control. So, Sergio, you said you computers, right? So,
We have 95,000 devices.
95,000 devices.
Right.
So if this 10.14 thing breaks your workflows, it's really well controlled, and now it's blowing up on you. So you're going to have to handle by that. But
It's only 5,000 max. So.
Anyway, that's the that's something when you're something that has been under control gets out of control, or maybe there's also on this emergency 24/7 call, you're maintaining servers you did program, somebody else screws up, and that's suddenly 2 weeks of your life. So an instinctive a little more disorganized than you want it to be, or that the work that you're doing to getting organized and staying on top of reaching the goals. Now, it's important that you think of these in terms of, most people this sort of platonic ideal theoretical maximum of what they have in their head, that what they could do if they were this productivity machine operating 168 hours a week, or that they're living up to their demands of their bosses, which if you have a reasonable boss is going to be, has something to do. The unreasonable boss, they don't know how busy you are when they give you the 10 new projects you need to get done in the next 3 months. So you don't judge yourself by this theoretical maximum. You don't judge yourself by your demands. You have to judge yourself by your own person, and whether you're living up to your own personal satisfaction. We'll talk about that specifically in a little bit. The other reason is you're operating from crisis mode. You finish one major crisis and then you go on to the next one. There's what would be if it were normal, but it just somehow never is. There's always something that's knocking it out of gear. I've met a lot of admins who, they have a 40-hour schedule, but somehow there's always 15 hours. Not 80 hours, not 70 hours, but there's always there's a 15-hour thing that just gets tacked on their schedule. And when they get one thing put to bed, there's another thing coming in after that. So it's just the ongoing regular place that everyone lives. And the last one is, you just hate going to work. You're not happy with your work. You're not satisfied with your output, or you're not satisfied with your rewards. Any of these things, most of these things people just sort of have in an unconscious sense until something really bad happens that makes them focus on it. But these should be kept in mind. These things here can all be triggers for organizing yourself to map the tasks to the long-term goals. So, having said all that, that's the kind of the overview of the philosophical points. The rest of the talk is basically brass tacks. Here's how it works for techies. I've got here 4 different ways to get organized. I wouldn't recommend that for anybody that's things. Basically, that's for your users, and not for people like us. That's OmniFocus. That's Daylight Customer Relations Management, and this is a ticketing system, and I can't remember which one I put in there. But the everything except the upper left quadrant, all 3 of those are basically highly complex systems for either individual management on the upper right or team management on the bottom 2, which basically you can put in all sorts of complexity in terms of how you organize your things and how it spits back out to you. And anybody working in a technical field, at the very least, you want OmniFocus for individual management. And if you're using a team thing at work, you probably still want. If you're using a team software stored on team networks, then all of your personal data that you put in there is owned by your boss. And they can claim it as intellectual property at any time, and then you don't have access to it, and all your private data is gone. So OmniFocus is definitely where you want to be for anything you need to keep separate and anything you don't want your boss to know about you. These are other ways to keep organized, which are non-technical. Papers on your desk, pictures on your fridge, writing on your hands, stacks of business cards from meetings. These are just as important. It doesn't have to be in bits to be important organizational data. If you have if you keep things in the cup holder of your car, or you throw things in there to remind yourself to do it later, well, you're only going to see that when you get in your car to go drive somewhere, and it's going to be useless. You need to have a way of getting back to that cup holder to look at it when you can do something about it. So these physical places are just as important and also have to be tracked. If you throw a piece of paper on your desk that you need to get to later, but you're away from your desk for 2 days because you're out in the field, that isn't a useful place to store things. You need to be aware of that. So the way you fix this is what I call pointers, because you will know where I stole that from. Pointers point to external memory, which is exactly what you're doing. In OmniFocus, a pointer is anything that you take a task. You've got a task in OmniFocus that says, "Go look over here. Go look in my cup holder to see what mnemonics I threw in there. Go look at this space on my Mac desktop where I put files that I need to look at again, but I haven't written down elsewhere." It's literally a connection to the external memory, and that's why I thought it was the best metaphor for what I was talking about. I already said that about pointers. Now, the key thing about having a pointer, and I'm going to say OmniFocus, that's what I use, but it can be any central task management system that you're using as your first place to look. You have one place that you look that tells you, go look over here into my team software where all of my work connections live. Go over here and look at my Mac desktop, look at my work desktop if that's a different one. But there's one place that you start. Pointer makes you relax about these places that you're putting them in, because when I put a file on my desktop, I know that my pointer is going to make me look there every 2 or 3 days. It's a recurring task that says, go clean up what's on your desktop or go deal with what's there. So when I put something on my desktop, that's with the knowledge that I'm going to look at it within 48 to 72 hours. If I have something that I need to look at in 3 hours, I don't put it on my desktop. I put it somewhere that I know I'm going to be looking at 2 or 3 times a day. The pointer also tells me where to put things. If I don't have a pointer to the cup holder of my car, which I don't because I don't have a car, then I don't put things there because I know I don't already have the trigger to tell me to go look there. So when I do create a new place to write things down, if I'm carrying a pad of paper in my back hip pocket, which I sometimes do, I add a reminder to look at the pad of paper. In the book, I talk about having a whiteboard in the shower for ideas that you capture when you're all wet. You can't use your iPhone. Well, when I used to use that, I had a reminder to take my iPhone after I took a shower, take a picture of the whiteboard, and then I have it with me, and then it goes into my system and gets processed that way. Whiteboard without the pointer to it means I don't see it again until I'm back in the shower, and then I'm wet again, and I'm not paying attention. It's not useful information there. And finally, the key thing about pointers is that no matter what organizational system you use, whether it's organized or whether it's formal or ad hoc, the tools that you use to primarily organize yourself are not going to be great for some things. You can't store spreadsheet data in OmniFocus. You can attach a spreadsheet to it, and you can point yourself from OmniFocus to a spreadsheet. But if you have something that's best organized in a spreadsheet, you want to use a spreadsheet for that. If something is best organized by dragging files to your desktop, because that's much faster than typing down the copying and pasting the 3 URLs that you want to check out later, drag it to your desktop and have a pointer to that to have it self-organized. In my opinion, any time that a task is self-evident, is obvious, and it's implicit in what you're looking at, I see a .weblog file on my desktop, that means I have to open that page. When I see that page, I'll know what to do with it next. When I have a folder that's labeled PHO MacAdmin on my desktop, in the last 2 weeks, it reminded me I had to write this keynote. I didn't have to think further about it. But if I have one on my desktop next week, I need to write down what that's for, because it won't be obvious to me what's happening there. So the way to make all this work most efficiently is, for every individual thing that you're doing, there is a tool there's a tool you're already using. Ad hoc system means whatever just came to mind over time. Plan system is whatever you picked out for it when you did the planning. There's going to be a best tool for that job. It might be the one you're already using. When something that you're using is not the best tool for that particular job and you think there's something better, you can swap it in a new tool. You take your set of tools, you add pointers to connect them all to each other, and then you add your goals, your projects, your tasks, and your information. And that's how you say, this is where I want to be in 2038, and this is what I'm doing on Tuesday to get there. That's how you break it all down and come up with, and this sounds much more structured than it has to be. It's structured if that's how you think. Otherwise, it's just making sure that everything is in service of those long-term goals. The next thing is you use the software to set rules for how the tools express themselves back to you. So in OmniFocus, you would put in all of your projects, and it would spit out to you across your projects what the next action is on any of your given projects. Here's what you're doing today. There'll be a different list of reminding you everything you're waiting for from other people in your company or other people in your family or what have you. And you have separate lists that you're only focusing on the things that you can do at that time, or reviewing the things that you're not doing because they're coming up later. Every week or two, you go through all the data that you stored there and you review it to make sure that it is accurate, that it's up to date with the things you've completed, that the outcomes and the goals haven't changed because you've gotten new requirements from somebody in your system, and you plan out what's happening between that time you're reviewing it and the next time you review it. So if you review it every 2 weeks, then you plan out the next 2 weeks ballpark as to what you intend to get accomplished in that time. You get your lists out of it. It's important that you get the list of what you need to do. Much more important is that it hides everything that you're not doing, because most people have far more things that they're trying to organize than they're actually doing. I mean, by definition, you're only doing one thing at a time, and you have 1,000 things that would be on your mind. So the key thing this is doing is it's showing you the 12 things you're doing today and hiding the 988 things that you're not getting to today. When you review the next time, you'll see the 988 things, and you'll be able to figure out which of those things go onto the agenda. Or with most software, when you check off the thing that's step 1 of a particular project, step 2 automatically bubbles up to the surface, and you can move on to that if you have time, or that goes into the next time you come back to that project. So what these lists do is they tell you where to go, what to do, and when to do it. So where to go, be at MacAdmin tonight at 6 o'clock, what to do, have this presentation ready, give the talk, when to do it, well, that's in my calendar. In my case, because of the ADD, when I put this information into my software, I'm also handing over a certain amount of autonomy that when my software tells me, here are the things you've agreed to do, these are the promises you've made to yourself, I trust my software to give that information back to me because I've tweaked it over time to make sure it's as accurate as possible. But when it tells me to do something, that's not a decision that I can make in the moment, unless today there are things that I had to do today that I had to triage off the end of my list, that's fine. But if it tells me that today I needed to finish up my keynote presentation for tonight, I can't decide in the moment, well, that's not as important as this thing over here that isn't even in my system. It just, this bright shining object that occurred to me today, I don't get that, I've lost that autonomy. I've granted it to my software. If you're more comfortable with how how your brain works and how you can control what you organize, then by all means, you can keep some of your autonomy. You should come up with that decision for yourself and then work with that. But once you've made a decision like that, you should only change it when you're deliberately changing how you work with your system. So this guy is Tony Robbins. He's very well known in the maximize yourself and be all you can be community. He gets up and gives these ridiculous 3-hour speeches telling everybody they can be God amongst men. And the secret about Tony Robbins is that even Tony Robbins isn't Tony Robbins. It's a personality he puts on, and which he does very well. I mean, he's a showman. We can't be Tony Robbins. You can't be a productivity god. Your target is basically pick the best good day you ever had, or at the end of the day you said, I got so much done today. That's your target. That's not what you do every day. That's just your target for where you want to be every day. But no more than that. By definition, the best you've ever done is the best you should hope to do. On all other days, you can't talk about giving 110% any more than you can give 26.4 hours in a day. 100% is what you get. And you don't even get that all the time. When you're exercising, you don't exercise 8 hours a day unless you're trained to do that for 10 years, and that's what you do for a living. You get an hour a day of exercise. You get maybe in that hour a day, you get 20 minutes of rest and 40 minutes of peak performance. That's 40 minutes out of 24 hours. Everything else is rests and sets and healing. And it's absolutely ludicrous to expect that you're going to have peak mental exercise at all times. You get good times, you get bad times, and you have to plan for that. So most people compare themselves to this platonic ideal standard, and no wonder they feel like crap, because there's this perfection in their mind, and if they're always at 40% of their perfection, and then when they get to 50%, they don't think, wow, I just improved 25% over what I was doing last week. They think I'm still 50% short of my goal. No wonder they feel awful, because they're constantly falling short. So instead, what your goal is your peak sustainable activity. Your peak is what I said before. It's the best, it's your best good day. With a system like this, if it organizes you well and you get more productive because of it, you're going to have a future best good day That's better than the one you had before, and that becomes your new peak that you can hope for. But even once you have that new peak, you're still not, you're still not planning for it on a daily basis. You're not saying, I'm going to have 5 straight days of that. You're going to plan for your sustainable, and the peak, when it comes, great, enjoy it. Sustainable means that you can do your tech stuff all year long without wanting to move to a log cabin with no electricity and no running water, because what you're doing this week, you can do for the next 52 weeks and not feel like, oh my God, I have to never look at another Mac ever again. If you have a crisis, if you have a project that, being delivered on deadline, if you have something that is demanding more from you than average, you can make an exception to these things. You can expect more of yourself. It's got to be a defined reason. It's got to be a temporary process, and if it must be exceptional. You can't go from one exceptional situation to the next exceptional situation and then pretend it's an exceptional situation. This is just your job at this point. So that's the overview of goals and what to expect of yourself. This next process is what I call self-documenting your code. This is just a sample Apple script where I'm just iterating through a loop. And this is an example of self-documenting my brain code. This is how I do my laundry. If I don't have Tide Pods, press the button and wait 2 days. If I do not have quarters, get a roll of quarters. Only after I've gone through those 2 conditionals can I do laundry subroutine. Now, this is an indication of something to go back to later, where do laundry actually has these prerequisites that don't happen in my house. I can't decide to do laundry at 2 in the morning on a Monday morning, and if I haven't already gotten the quarters, and if I don't already have the detergent, something as simple as doing laundry, which we normally do mindlessly, well, all of a sudden Monday morning I might be wearing dirty clothes because you can't get a roll of quarters at 2 o'clock in the morning. So when you're planning out projects from the simple, like doing laundry, to the complex, I recommend that you have granular tasks. To me, a task is granular when it's a description of how to do it. For you, doing laundry might be granular. You know what the steps are of doing laundry. I prefer to have a little more granular than that, because if I've got clothes in the washer and clothes in the dryer and I'm doing something else while I'm waiting for them to be done, I like being able to look at my list and say, okay, clothes come out of the dryer in 20 minutes from now. Don't forget the load in the washer for 6 hours because you forgot that you had another load in there, which I've done. Tasks with due dates can be hard due dates, firm, or soft, which most people have no conception of, and those who do get them very confused. A hard due date for a task is a consequential deadline. If I did not have this PowerPoint presentation ready by 5 o'clock today, well, the first consequence is that I'd be doing it in the Uber on the way here, and the second consequence is that I'd be here talking without slides. So consequential deadline, bad things happen if you miss a particular due date. A firm task, a firm due date, is one that I've got, it's like the master's thesis. I've got 6 months before it's due, but I have 100 things to do that lead up to it. And if I miss one of the interim deadlines, that means 2 weeks later, it's going to be 10 times worse. Or at the end of the process, it's going to be absolutely hellacious. So firm deadlines you stick to in order to keep everything happy. And there's a third category called soft deadlines. And that's when you pick a due date just when you want to get it done. So for doing laundry, most people say my due date to do my laundry is every Saturday from 1 to 4. That's what I do it Saturday afternoon. That's my due date. Well, if you have a full closet of clean clothes, it's not actually due that day until you run out of clean clothes. And even then, you can buy more clothes. There are other things you do that don't necessarily relate to doing laundry. But initially, most people do laundry more often than they have to, and so it's never quite due. It's just when they have it in mind. That's picking a due date out of your head. Now, the problem with doing this is an example of what my to-do list looked like the week before I finished my book, where you can see I've got 40 tasks. I've got 12 different tasks to do at 9 a.m. that morning. And now I'm starting the 10 a.m. list, and you can see from the size of that scroll bar how long this list is. Now, in this particular case, I was deliberately neglecting this list because I was distracted by my book and I wasn't doing a bunch of routine tasks, and I knew I wasn't doing it. But if you have firm and soft due dates that aren't actually related to something that aren't related to consequences, then you've got all these firm and soft things happening at 9 o'clock in the morning. They're going to distract you from the thing that's due at 3, that is genuinely due, that has consequences if you miss it. So I don't know about you, but I've had many days where I've gone through my list and I thought I was cooking with gas, and at 4 o'clock I see the thing that makes me realize I want to skip dinner tonight because I'm going to be working on this till midnight. And had I organized my due dates a little better, I would have seen that first. I would have gotten that before everything, gotten that done earlier in the day, and the rest of it would have happened when they happened because they weren't quite due. And that's why you triage your stuff properly and know what is hard doing, what is hard, what is firm, what is soft. So you don't have this kind of chaos. Most people have due lists that are mostly firm or mostly soft. A lot of due dates that seem like they have consequences actually don't really, if you think about it. The report that's due Friday might be okay if it gets out on Monday. I mean, if you've never missed that Friday deadline, you don't know what happens if it goes out on Monday. You'd be pretty clear that it's not that if you miss it entirely, there's problems. But most people are unaware when a hard date is actually firm. We all have projects that the due date, it's not really due, it's just as soon as I can get to it, I get to it. That's a category of tasks, it's not a due date. So what you do is, in order to keep everything prioritized, and when I say prioritize, I mean naturally prioritize. You generally don't want to manually prioritize because you're spending time playing with your tasks instead of doing them. So you do your hard due tasks first, then you do what's firm due because that's a gift to yourself in the future, and that's when you get to the stuff that is as soon as possible. Because as soon as possible means possible, and if you don't get it done this week, then you'll get it done next week. But the as soon as possible tasks would come before all the other things that are preferential but don't have the same kind of time pressure. And if you do this right, or if you have the proper kind of categorization for your due tasks, once you triage your due list properly into hard, firm, and soft, you are going to get stuff that doesn't have due dates attached to it. Most people attach due dates to things out of the air because they're afraid they won't get to it otherwise if they don't attach this random date to it. You're going to get to it because you're going to have fewer things on your to-do list. You're going to have fewer things that are deadline today, and so you'll have more time in your workday to get to these things that are as soon as possible and preferred. So last thing I'm going to talk about is a system I come up called yak shaving, endemic to technical stuff. You got a problem where the problem you're trying to solve is you have to restore crucial files from somebody's backup. You find out the time machine has eaten them, you can't find them in your time machine backup. The next thing you do is you go to TM util to see where you can find it, and that leads to this, which leads to this, which leads to that, and so on and so forth. And eventually, you find yourself doing something completely different. So, and that's when you realize, hey, this is not what I sat down to do 6 hours ago. Now, the way to fix this is, and this requires brainware, this requires brain training. When you get to this point, you're on step 3, and you're now 2 steps away from your original task to restore your client files. That's when I create an Omni outliner document like this one. So this is a project I was doing the week before I wrote this, the first version of this presentation. I had a client call me up and say, I want to look at your website. A potential client called me up and say, I want to look at your website. At the time, my website's homepage had a lot of 4-letter words about the president and the things he was doing. Didn't think that was the most professional presentation, so I decided to rewrite my website to move the 4-letter words behind a warning and have only my professional work on the front. So I need to rearrange my site better presentation, and then I realized, okay, now I need to research the features that aren't already there, and then I need to test out various WordPress plugins to get there, and that's when I realized I needed a yak list, because now I'm no longer rearranging my site, I'm testing out plugins. As you go through the list, this is why I use an outliner. When a particular task, like need to test various plugins, well, that had its own prerequisites and follow-ups. So to test plugins, I need to find the plugins, then I need to use the plugin to add the features and see if they work the way I want them to. So every time you have a nested project, you put in the prerequisites, you put in the follow-ups, and then at the top level, you also have prerequisites and follow-ups, so you're going to figure out as you go through the process. This is leaving a breadcrumb trail as you go backwards through the list and forwards through the list to know where you've been, where you're going, and to keep the end in mind. This is, when it comes up, so this is what my list looked like at the end of it all. You probably can't see the numbers, but this number 1 here is the first thing I started with doing, and then everything here is numbered in terms of what the process I went through to get there. So I went from number 1 to number 2 to number 3 up there. I then went forward for a little while, then I had to double back. So this was my checklist, and at this point, I actually added the Omni outliner checkboxes so I can actually say, this is what I've done, this is what's remaining for this task. Now, what ended up happening is because I had this documented like this, I started to go to I had gotten back to this process up here, and I realized that in that particular portion of the list, I had a project that was going to take me 3 days just to do that part of it. So I'd come up with a solution, but the solution was time consuming. And because I could see this entire thing and how far away it was from my original goal, I realized this is just crazy. This is not a solution. This is playing with WordPress for 3 days. So at that point, I threw out the half of things. I came up with a quick and dirty kludge. I implemented the kludge, and I made a note: get back to it when you can. In 3 months, the quick and dirty kludge is still running. It works fine. So if I had not done this, I wouldn't have known where I was going. I wouldn't have known what I had done, and I wouldn't know how to get back from it when I do get back to it. So that to me, honestly, is the probably the best idea I've ever had in terms of controlling my tech projects. So your tech project is figure out where you're going, figure out how to get there, enjoy the trip as you go, and put that on your to-do list. And that is the end of the presentation. And the last time I gave this presentation, I gave it to a room full of independent Mac consultants. This is my first time to people most people here are full-time jobs. So I would like to hear different kinds of questions than I got last time. Or discussion, or what have you.
I never actually used an organization software. Do you really recommend
Sorry.
I've never actually used an organization software. Does OmniFocus really help you?
Yeah, no, OmniFocus is the best tool that I've ever found, because it's basically the problem with task software is that most people go and they find the one that works best for them right now. So Things 3 is great software. It's very simple to learn. And, you basically have certain structures and certain metadata, but it's cross-platform from Mac to iOS. It has other hooks and other displays. But if your needs grow more complex than what you have now, you're already at the ceiling of what you're doing. OmniFocus takes much longer to learn, many more bells and whistles. Every task has far more metadata, and a lot of people get into it and they realize this is far more complex than I need. The problem is that there's a information capture once you're in the system, the network effect, where once you've got data in there and it's all linked to each other, it's all connected to each other, well, it's a pain in the neck to get information out of one organizational system into the next one. And there's a chapter in the book on how to do that, but I don't recommend you plan to do that. You do that when you have to change tools, not because you're forced to change tools. So OmniFocus, in my opinion, is the best tool for getting yourself up and running, but also having plenty of ceiling for what you need to do 2 years from now, 3 years from now, and have more latitude. The other thing is that OmniFocus this year came out with OmniFocus 3, which is Mac iOS. Has much more control in terms of hiding the complexity you're not using. So OmniFocus 3 for iOS is out. For Mac, it's coming out in September, and by the end of the year, they're doing OmniFocus for web, which means if you have your OmniFocus database on your home Mac and you're using Windows at work, you can pull up a web page and look at it. And that's crucial, because once you have a task management system, you pretty much want it to be ubiquitous. You always want to have it with you on an iPhone or what have you, so you can check off tasks and just pull up a list to reference what you're doing from it. So now, having said that, the key thing is picking up the tool that works best for you. If what works best for you is a legal notepad, use the legal notepad. I mean, like the bells and whistles are there in case they adapt to you. But absolutely, you should. The first time you go from an ad hoc system to a planned system, you're making a transition process. I had to skip that in this talk, but there is a process I provide for making that transition cleanly and safely without losing track of everything you're already doing and having to put your life on hold for 3 months, because that's a huge problem. Most people, when they adopt the software, they think they're going to do it in a weekend, and that doesn't happen. So you make one transition from your ad hoc system to your first planned system. But it's going to take you 2 or 3 months before you realize whether what you guessed would work for you actually does work for you. Most people can't assess that well until they've had experience. You then might transition from your first major software system to the next one. Hopefully the first one works out well for you. But you keep on, hopefully your central tool works out well for you, like OmniFocus, but you can keep on swapping in and out other tools. So, for example, I use OmniFocus for my central planning, but I've got stuff on my desktop, I've got stuff in Google Keep, I have stuff in Google Tasks. I have an Android phone, so sometimes some of my stuff has to live there. And when I need to when I need a better tool for something I'm doing, I will usually, at this point, I'm usually able to just pull out one part of the system, slot in something new for that particular set of tasks. You want to change the core of the system as rarely as possible. Answer your question?
Yeah.
Jeff, how many books have you written? How many books have you written?
This is number 2.
Okay.
My first book was in '95 on how to be self-employed, and that was a dead tree book. And this one.
In '95, were you able to outline like you are now? Like, I'm sure you use these tools obviously to write the second book, since that's what you're writing about. Well, the first book, did you outline it kind of the same way you did your second one, or was it a different process?
In both cases, I was writing from experience. I was writing from what I knew. So once I figured out what I wanted to write, essentially both times I wrote the book twice. I wrote a first draft, which got my ideas down, and then a second draft where I threw out 90% and had it, just had it better phrased and better organized. And in the case of the first book, I had ADD, was not diagnosed, did not have tools like this one, and ended up writing most of it in a 7-day period after my deadline. Went to Las Vegas for what was supposed to be my valedictory. I finished my book trip and ended up literally not leaving my hotel room for 7 days, ordering room service, smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day, and writing 10,000 words a day. Do not want to repeat that experience. That's why I'm organized now. To me, I write all the time. I write for tidbits, and so I'm constantly turning out articles. Writing a long piece is not that much different from writing 100 short pieces. It's just a question. In some ways, it's a little bit easier because you have more of an overarching structure. But I wouldn't, basically, if you're writing a book length article, if you're doing book length writing, if it works for you to have everything mapped out to the nth degree, map it out. If it doesn't, don't. And chances are you're gonna have to trial and error a bit to figure out what works best for you. Is that it?
I just want to say I use OmniFocus. I really like it.
Okay, and how long have you been using it?
Like 5 years.
Okay, so you started with OmniFocus 1 then?
I think with 2.
Two?
2 had just come out. Wait, 1. Right before 2. But it's nice not to. When I put enough things in my head, I start forgetting things. So
Right.
It's nice to just be able to pull out my phone and put something down,
Absolutely.
not think about it, and then when I have a clear head and I sit down, I'm like, okay, what am I going to do today? I can just open it up and
Right.
just look up.
Well, so that brings me to 2 points. The first one is what you were saying before about using OmniFocus. So what he said, he's the same experience I have, where most people who start with OmniFocus 1 are still using OmniFocus 3 today. Whereas a lot of these task management, project management systems, people try them on and throw them away every 2 or 3 years. Most people who find OmniFocus works for them stay with it for the long term. And as a result, I can put something in my OmniFocus database that says, in 2025, you want to do this. That's the start date of this project. And it will go off. I've had stuff go off that I put in 2011. I've had stuff go off that I put into Omni Outliner before OmniFocus existed, when it was a bunch of Apple scripts, and then they bought the software, they bought the guy who was writing the Apple scripts, and they made him write OmniFocus. That all imported. So I've got stuff that was from 8 years ago that went off. Sticking to the same software is always where you want to be. The second thing is, so what he was saying is that you use OmniFocus. Now, it sounds like you use it a little more loosely than I do. If I'm not actually referring to OmniFocus on a daily basis, I know I'm off the rails, because I know if I rely on my brain, I just know it's not working. There's stuff that I'm missing. Other people can use OmniFocus as a reference, but mostly keep it in their heads. Whatever works for you works for you. Basically, when you go back to use it as a reference and you see things you're missing, that's your reminder to check it more often. But one key thing that it does is that it's a reliable place to store anything. So I have an app on my Android that I mainly use as an inbox. It talks to my OmniFocus database. It goes in the inbox. You can forward stuff in there. I capture probably 100 things a day. 100 things that are each possibly projects or tasks. And I know full well that I'm capturing probably 20 times as much stuff as I will accomplish in the rest of my life. When I go to look at the inbox, I ruthlessly call out the things that sounded like a great idea on Thursday, and now not so much. But also, like, one of the ideas, I had a fantastic idea for an iOS app last week. I don't program in Swift. I'd have to learn that first. So this is a 6-month project. When I get to it, if it still looks like a great idea, I'll put it on my someday list. And when I get to it, I'll realize, okay, this is going to be 6 months. How am I going to find the time and I'm only allowed to commit to it if I move other things off my agenda, because I know I'm already operating at my sustainable max. So OmniFocus, the best thing about it is that it allows you, the best thing about any kind of centralized planning system, but OmniFocus specifically is very good at this. It allows you to, or it gets you into the habit of thinking about what you're committing to as you commit to it. So I know that if I add something to my agenda, like if I add a task, there's no problem, I'll get to it when I get to it. But if I add something on my agenda with a deadline that has to slot into my existing hours, if I don't remove other stuff, I'm committing to working more hours. And I know that I'm already at the number of hours where if I work more, I get diminished output. The quality of my work goes down. So that I know I have to do that swap. I think that I know for a fact that when I put stuff on my desktop that I have a pointer to, and it's not organized in OmniFocus, that can get out of control. Because I'm not thinking about it, I just throw stuff there. And it's only when I process that and put that into my OmniFocus database do I have any idea of the bigger picture and how they all trade off with each other. One thing I forgot to mention is, so down here, that's my email address. I mean, I'm also Jeff at jeffporten.com. Take control at jeffporten.com for book-related stuff. This is the URL, and I apologize. I meant to get a MacAdmin discount code, and I forgot to contact my publisher in time. So that CC Power will get you 30% discount off the book. And if anybody is interested in buying it for your team, buying it for your entire company, possibly, my publisher does bulk discounts. So it's my opinion that this kind of stuff, if you're a manager, some of these ideas you probably don't want your employees thinking about, because right now they're working to your tune, and I'm encouraging them not to. But if you're, for your colleagues, if you think there's just general morale problems, if people are just unhappy, some of these ideas can really get them going. And the other key thing is that if your coworkers are not as reliable as you want them to be, systems like this make them more reliable, because it gives them an easy way. I mean, most people who are unreliable, they're not lazy, they don't have bad character, they just never learn these tools and techniques. And one thing you're gonna get from my book, even if what I suggest doesn't work for you, I give people multiple options at every step of the way. I say, here's the category, here's the thing you need to do now. Here's 3 or 4 different ways to do this thing, whatever works for you. And at the end of the book, I say, if these techniques didn't work, you now know what the categories are. Here's how you go and find your own additional solutions. So by the end of the book, they have more information about what failed for them. They have more information about what worked for them, and they have the tools they need to get themselves a little more organized. So. This is why I think team purchases might be a good idea. Obviously, also any individual here might want it. I recommend it as well. And that email address if you have any questions after reading the book.
Is the book a physical book or a digital?
Oh no, just an ebook. It's after the code, it's going to be $10.50. The purchase price is $15, and then once you buy it, you go to a web page where you can download it as EPUB, PDF, or Mobi. For Kindle, and that's DRM free. You can download all 3 versions and put it wherever you like.
We're saying you only to buy one and then share it to our entire company.
we're not going to stop you. Basically, there's one of those. There's one of the cover pages that says, "Please don't, please don't do that." I mean, actually, in the cover page, my publisher says, treat this like a book. If you're not reading it at the moment and you want to loan it to somebody, give them the copy. Let them read it, but when they're done with it, they should, quote, give it back to you. And if they want to keep reading at that point, they should buy a copy. But the reason we do DRM free is because A, it's just the right thing to do, and B, we want people to feel like this is something they own and they can share. So, we're not going to stop you.
How many pages is that?
Sorry?
How many pages is the book?
168. So, and the book in the there's a chapter which is mandated for all Take Control books called the Quick Start. It gives you the map of the book, so if there's something you think you need right now, you can jump to it. But what I recommend is the process for it is that the first time you get it, just skim through it. You don't have to actually read it closely, and you don't have to implement it quickly, but skim through it, because if you know what I'm going to be telling you to do in 5 chapters, it'll inform what you're doing in the next chapter. That you can do that in an hour. And then when you have time, go to the first chapter, read that, follow the steps in that one, and as you have time, go to the next chapter. So I've had a number of people come to me and say, I'm not organized enough to even read your book. I've had it for 2 months. And I say, that's what the book is for. You know, like it's organized to accommodate that as well. You will, especially in the in the chapter where you're setting up your system for the first time, it just means you'll spend more time with your existing system and the planned system. You'll spend more time transitioning over into it because you won't have as much time to concentrate on it. But there's a whole chapter on how to do that properly, and you can take as much time there as you need. And basically, every mistake I've made in 25 years, I tried to answer in the book. I made them all. So. All right, thank you.
Just quickly, I mean, can you give me an overview of what your process is for choosing a program like OmniFocus?
Yeah. So in the book, I come up with 4 different categories of what I call the task app, the central tool. The categories are basically, very simple. It's like reminders on, reminders on your iPhone or Mac, where you just have lists and no outlining, no nothing like that. Then there's medium complexity, like things for upper complexity for individuals, like OmniFocus, and then you get into team software, which can start at a little less complex than OmniFocus and go through the roof. If you use Salesforce to organize your teams, you literally need to hire a room full of people like us to program it for you. And I know that because I started running a nonprofit 2 months ago. We have a Salesforce database, and it will cost me $10,000 to make it useful. So we're not using Salesforce anymore, I can tell you that. But yeah, I mean, like the upper limit for team databases, I mean, OmniFocus does have an upper limit, which you understand. However, it also has Apple scripting. It also has all sorts of automation tools. If you want to get into that, there's plenty of stuff there. So once you've decided what category works well for you, and it's just in this room, I guarantee you, something of the complexity of OmniFocus is what you want. There's just no 2 ways about it. But once you've got the central tool, there are hundreds of other things you can do. I mean, I literally do have a notepad in that bag for those times when I screwed up and all my batteries are dead. I have a notepad and a pen and paper. The other thing it's good for is that if I'm in a social situation where screens aren't useful, you can't pull out your iPhone at a funeral if you have a good idea. You can pull a notepad out of your pocket. Right? People aren't going to look at you like that. Also on a date, staring at your screen or your watch is not considered polite. Maybe writing something down on a piece of paper is a little more polite, depending on who your date is. So that's what I mean by the best tool for the job. You want to have multiple tools for particular situations and particular times. And when a tool is substandard, when you realize I have these ideas when I'm in the shower or when I'm at a social gathering, when it's not polite to pull out my iPhone, or I one friend I was advising, he goes on these extreme hiking trips. Well, first you can break your iPhone on day 1 and not have access to it for 7 days, and 2, he's out of cell phone range within 3 hours and he's not back in a week. Might also not have electricity. So that person needs non-technical tools. Spreadsheets instead of outline lists, relational databases when the spreadsheet doesn't work. Any one of these things could be a tool that you swap in for a particular organizational task or a particular structure of data you need to refer to. And being able to swap in and out those external tools is just the key thing that I think, one of the crucial ideas of the book is how to make all of that work in synchrony with each other.
Thank you.
I've talked too long. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we got a little bit of time left, so we can go to the open discussion.
Yep. You want to keep this going, or?
We can kill it at this point, I think.
All right.
So,
all right. Yep. Thanks, anybody who's watching.
Yep.
See you next time.